Good morning, everyone. My name is Amanda Toman. I am the director of the Public Wireless Supply Chain Innovation Fund. I'd like to welcome you all here today for our NOFO information session, and I am overwhelmed with the amount of turnout with such short notice. So to kick things off this morning, I would like to introduce the Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Communications and Information and the NTIA Administrator, Alan Davidson. Alan is an internet policy expert with more than 20 years of experience as an executive, public interest advocate, technologist, and attorney. Alan also served in the Obama-Biden administration as the first director of digital economy at the U.S. Department of Commerce. We are honored to have him here this morning to provide opening remarks for our event. Please welcome Mr. Davidson.
Good morning. Thank you, Amanda. And wow, it's good to see so many people here. I would just say welcome and thank you all for participating in today's information session. I should also say I have to thank our hosts at the Department of Interior. Those of you who are NTIA groupies know that we've been doing a lot of events here, actually. I heard that they were going to set up an office for us in the corner. So clearly we're taking advantage of the department's hospitality, and we appreciate it. I'd actually like to take a moment to thank Amanda Toman, who's the relatively new head of our Wireless Innovation Fund and has really jumped into this role as our leader in this work going forward, and we're deeply appreciative. I also really want to salute the team of people who put together, stood up this program, and a huge amount of work goes into standing up a program from scratch, putting out the notices, getting the processes in place. And you'll be hearing from some of them today: JD, Sarah, Carolyn, Jay Charay, who's the head of our international division at NTIA, who had a huge role and did a tremendous amount of work putting this together. And I do want to give a special shout out to Phil Murphy, who was a senior advisor in our front office and really acted as the interim director of this program when we were standing it up. So thank you to that entire team. Really, really appreciate it. I'm gonna just give a clap. Thank you. Thank you. We're thrilled to be here today to share the details and answer questions about the launch of this first round of funding from our $1.5 billion Wireless Innovation Fund. And the starting point, of course, for us has been this felt need, this urgency to support American competitiveness at home and around the world. And our leadership and innovation in technology has been critical to economic and national security for decades. Our success in leading the world in wireless telecommunications is a key component of that. To continue to lead, American companies and entrepreneurs, along with our partners, must be at the cutting edge of these technologies. The Innovation Fund was born out of that need and the need to increase the resilience and the diversity and the security of the wireless equipment ecosystem in order to maintain that leadership. And frankly, today we do not have the global ecosystem of trusted vendors, diverse set of vendors that we need. A very small set, a handful of incumbent vendors have an outsized role in the 5G equipment market, and at least two of them are from regions that we don't feel lead them to be trusted firms. This consolidation leaves us vulnerable to supply chain disruptions and puts us at a competitive disadvantage. It also means that our allies lack options too. They may be forced to use network architecture built by vendors from countries of concern that don't share our values. The Wireless Innovation Fund will help change that. It will allow us to invest in the next generation of wireless innovation to unlock opportunities for new and emerging companies. It will help us develop the global telecom market, strengthen our supply chain, and give our allies trusted choices. It's a long project. It's going to take years to do this, and to get there, we're going to need your help. A few months ago, I spoke to over 200 attendees at the first public session for the Wireless Innovation Fund. We listened and we learned from that session, and hopefully the comments that we heard, you'll see reflected in the notice that we put out and in the way we're approaching this program. We heard, for example, that testing, evaluation, research and development are going to be critical if we're going to catalyze new approaches to wireless networks. 76% of the respondents to that call that we put out, our request for comments, 76% said, cited the need to prioritize testing in our approach. And nearly 70% said we need to invest in security. And so our notice, our first notice of funding opportunity, responds to that input in a few important ways that hopefully you've seen. First, we focus on the testing and evaluation of open and interoperable networks. This includes expanding industry-accepted testing and evaluation activities to assess these networks, developing new and improved testing methodologies to validate them, addressing specific wireless testing needs. Second is an emphasis on security. We've heard this loud and clear. Research and development should make sure to minimize network risk, build trust, and mitigate potential vulnerabilities. And finally, we are extending eligibility to international applicants as a result of the feedback that we received. Our goal is to deliver the first grants from this $140.5 million tranche in August. And I will just say that's an ambitious goal. It's going to take a lot of work from us and a lot of work from you all to make sure we can hit those deadlines. You'll have until June 2nd to apply for this funding. And I will say we expect part of the urgency of this is, of course, the urgency of the moment, but also we expect to open another round of funding next year and maybe even sooner. So I'll just say we're eager to move forward. We're here today to answer your questions and help provide insights into the federal awards process, which I know can be murky at times. You're going to have some great experts to hear from. We're joined by Carolyn Dunn, our grants expert, who will shed some light on best practices and next steps here, as well as J.D. Griffith, the Innovation Fund's technical lead. I'll just say I urge you to put them to work. They are terrific, very knowledgeable, and they will help guide everybody through this process. It's important that we get this right, and we need your help to do so. 5G and its successors are already revolutionizing how we work, how we live, but to unlock their full potential, we need to open this global market for wireless infrastructure and encourage new approaches. In closing, I'll say that we believe, honestly, what we've always believed since the beginning of the internet, that open and interoperable networks are the wave of the future, are the right way to promote innovation. Our Wireless Innovation Fund will help put the U.S. and its partners at the forefront of that innovation. This is about ensuring that our economic and national security in wireless communications, to ensuring that we are leaders in this space for years to come. The investments that we make now will help create an open, diverse, and more resilient marketplace. Let's go to that future together. Thank you for your partnership. Thank you for being here, and we look forward to the conversation today. And with that, I am going to turn it back over to Amanda. Thanks, Amanda.
Okay, thank you very much, Alan, for your leadership and vision in your remarks this morning. We were very happy to have you here. So again, I want to welcome you all here today for this first information session on our first NOFO. So I'm really overwhelmed by the turnout. There's a lot of people that have come on relatively short notice, and that makes me very happy about the potential that this innovation fund really has to have a big impact and actually drive innovation and drive open and interoperable networks. So I think it's really an exciting time for our country and for telecommunications. So I think we're really at a sort of an edge where we are shifting how telecommunications happens. So moving to open and interoperable networks is really exciting for our country in that I think it will help facilitate national and economic security as we move forward. So being able to provide a diverse pool of vendors that we can choose from to build out the telecommunications ecosystem, something that our international partners, our allies can leverage as trusted resources to build out their telecommunications network is really important. So we're hopeful that this fund will help us regain leadership in the telecommunications market space. Like Alan said, there's been a lot of consolidation, and it will be really nice to have some U.S. Vendors and supplying equipment in this market space. So I think if we are successful in terms of accelerating the adoption of open and interoperable networks, we really will have a healthy and vibrant ecosystem for the carriers to choose from. So one thing I think that's really important, and it gives me lots of hope that we've got a fairly full room here today, is the need to work together and the need for our industry partners to really come together. Since it is open, interoperable, a modular system, that will inherently mean those components will have to work together. So we are going to need companies to work together to coalesce around things like how interoperability works, things like standards, really to be a success. So, I realize this is not easy. There are a lot of challenges that we're going to face, but I am hopeful with the turnout that we have today, and hopefully as we continue to move forward, that this new ecosystem that we can hopefully help build and impact will be a success. So I really see this first NOFO as a foundational first step. So as you've all been able to read that first NOFO, it's about $140 million we're looking to put out, and it's for test and evaluation. And the idea is that it is foundational. So with open and interoperable networks, we've heard from industry, both at NTIA with the 5G challenge, with the listening session, with the request for comments. In my previous role in the DoD, working with the same community, it was very clear from industry that there was a need for test and evaluation facilities. So the hope with this first NOFO was to kick things off for the Innovation Fund with that foundational first step by looking to develop those capabilities, hopefully to act as a resource that industry or the new ecosystem can leverage moving forward. And I really think that the test and evaluation facilities and the research and development that comes out of the work will play that foundational role. And we'll be able to be a resource to validate things like performance, things like interoperability, security, and really characterize the components and how that telecommunications system will work. So I think getting you all here today, having you all work together and actively participate in this application process is really what we're looking for as an outcome from today. So we're excited you're here. We're excited to have your questions, excited to field those. We've got the team here, like Alan said. We've got JD, who's the chief technologist, who's going to give you technical deep dive into what we're looking for. Carolyn Dunn from the grants perspective, so how do you submit a good package? And then we're going to have Sarah Skaluba from the policy side to help us answer questions. So please ask as many questions as you can. We also want to thank those that submitted questions beforehand, like we had asked. We recognize we did get quite a lot. So we are going to answer all of them. However, we might not address all of them today. They will be responded to or answered in a frequently asked question site that'll be available on the website. And then a couple of reminders, we are live streaming, so if you do ask a question, just be cognizant of that we will be available on the internet, and there will be a resource for you to go back and take a look at this event as well. So, we look forward to your applications, we look forward to working with you, and we hope this is just the beginning of our working together. So we are developing what the rest of the Innovation Fund looks like right now. So please stay tuned and continue to go to the NTIA website where we'll make announcements about what is coming next and further engagements after today. So I want to go over just some high-level objectives for what we are asking for with this first NOFO. So I think most of you are probably aware that the Innovation Fund was established in the FY21 NDAA. So Congress developed 7 primary objectives around promoting and accelerated the adoption of open and interoperable networks, looking at things like driving interoperability, so multi-vendor networks could work together. How do we develop security? How do we develop network virtualization? So all of these things are part of our objectives and will be considered in the strategy as we move forward. So again, just keep that in mind as we talk through today, and understanding that this T&E is really that first step and foundation to the larger program. So the Innovation Fund was established in 2021. We didn't get funding until last August when the CHIPS Act, so that authorized the $1.5 billion. And then that set the timer for us to move forward to getting grants awarded. So we are under a fairly tight timeline. We're expecting applications to come in the 2nd of June, and then we are anticipating making awards, or the first awards, by early August. So we'll likely have a couple awarded early August and then move through the rest of the application awards after that. So recognize we're on a tight timeline and really drive home the need to get good, solid applications from the outset. So the NOFO includes two primary technical focus areas, and that first focus area is for test and evaluation activities, which we've talked a lot about. And again, the driver for this is because of what we've heard from those of you in the room and our partners to develop a capability for interoperability testing, performance testing, a way to characterize security. So we're looking to set up that facility as part of this NOFO. And then the second technical focus area is for testing methodologies for research and development. So understanding that open and interoperable is still new. So how can you develop potentially new methodologies to characterize things like performance, things like security? And our thought process is that the T&E activities or the laboratories will likely be the larger dollar value portion of this effort. So probably up to $10 to $50 million is a sweet spot for what we're anticipating for the laboratory piece of this NOFO. For the testing methods, research and development, we're anticipating somewhat smaller applications in that area because it is more research and development focused. But one thing I do want to stress is the need to focus on what we in the DoD call transitionability. But for the T&E activities, if we stand up a laboratory, what is the sustainment for that laboratory? Is it adding to the ecosystem? And ultimately, that would be our goal, that if we do fund a laboratory, that it remains a resource for the larger ecosystem to leverage moving forward. And with the testing method research and development, the idea that a new methodology might be created, how does that transition and how could that potentially be implemented in one of those test and evaluation laboratories? So we'll have a lot of description from Carolyn about grants and how to submit a good grant. In the NOFO, we do describe cost sharing, that it is not a requirement, although it is desired. So please keep that in mind. And the period of performance is up to 5 years for this effort. So that is a maximum, and usually I would like to do things a little bit faster, but I think for the test and evaluation facilities, extending for a relatively longer period of performance makes sense because of what we're trying to do to enable a resource for the ecosystem. So with that, I am going to hand it over to J.D. Griffith to give us an overview on the technology objectives for this first NOFO.
Thank you, Amanda. So as Amanda briefly described, we do have kind of two core technical objectives here. One is advancing testing and evaluation capabilities through creation of additional facilities and testing capabilities throughout the United States, along with that research and test and evaluation methods. So we really want to ensure that objective testing and evaluation is available on a level playing field and providing useful results to people that want to develop open interoperable 5G radio access network products. We also understand that this is still a rather large paradigm shift for the industry. And so we want to ensure that the testing evaluation methods that are available do make sense for, multi-vendor networks and this new shift towards virtualization and away from hardware-focused design. So we want to ensure that it's open interoperable virtualized networks that can provide meaningful information and that both product developers and consumers can objectively evaluate the products they're looking at developing and deploying inside of their networks. Richard, can we get the next slide? Yep. Can we go back one? Great, thanks. So really the kind of big differentiation here is the T&E activities are focusing on the current state of the art and what we can learn today to help advance this ecosystem. So we want to leverage the existing industry best practices in assessing interoperability, performance, and security for open interoperable 5G RAN products. We also want to ensure that this provides actionable information to suppliers so that people can take this information, use this to improve provide material improvements for their products, and so that they can provide their best foot forward in developing a useful product for the ecosystem. We also want to make sure we can use this information to potentially refine the existing specifications for open interoperable and 5G networks. Because, for those who have been involved in 3GPP and the O-RAN Alliance and other organizations developing specification in the space, it's an iterative process. Multiple releases over time, making gradual improvements as we advance the state of the art. We want to ensure that the testing that we are conducting through this program can really help advance that state of the art, not just for individual companies and their products, but also for the ecosystem as a whole. And we want to ensure we're improving transparency. We want to make sure it's not opaque. We want to ensure that people know what they're being tested on, and people evaluating different products in this space can understand that everything's being tested on a level playing field that's consistent time and time again. For R&D, this is a little bit more filling in the gaps of what we are missing today and how do we understand it going forward. Moving towards this new and kind of nascent approach to telecommunications networks, we want to ensure that any of the testing and evaluation methods we use are reliable and repeatable, and we want to improve on any of them that may be a little bit more difficult to provide independent assessment. We want to ensure that this addresses the developing needs from this new approach of openness and interoperability, and especially from virtualization as we move away from hardware-based design. And we also ensure that these new methods bring value to the supply chain. It's not just about adding another significant digit to your measurement. It's about ensuring that the tests being conducted can provide value to both the product developers and the companies that acquire these products and deploy them in their networks. And ensuring that we also improve accessibility to this useful information. We want to ensure that these test methods are available and that folks can use this to test, either be in academia, in product development labs, or in test and evaluation laboratories like we're discussing for the first part of this NOFO. And we also want to ensure that this leads to industry best practices and developing the specifications, whether for conformance tests that industry will use in determining how effective some of these new interoperable products are. And with that, I will turn it over to Carolyn Dunn to talk a little bit more about the NOFO best practices and guidelines for grant applications. Thank you.
Thank you, JD, and thank you to everyone who came today. I am the part of the program where we get into the minutia and the murkiness of applying for grants. So welcome to my fun presentation. Honestly, there is an art to applying for a grant, and I'm hoping that today's session will help you to understand why we ask for certain things and understand how to respond to them so that you can be successful in applying for the grant. We're going to talk about a few topics that are way in the weeds, and I am not going to read everything on the slides, but I wanted you to have the information so that you can use it as a reference, and the presentation will be available online later. So we're going to talk about, first of all, the system for awards management. It's a federal-wide system, and it's very complicated and not very, it creates challenges for everyone, let's put it that way. We're going to talk about grants.gov, which is the portal for where you apply for the program. We're going to talk about if you want to apply for multiple projects, how to do that, because we've gotten lots of questions on that. We're going to talk about the requirements if you're applying as a consortium, what that means and what we'd like to see to to be able to evaluate that. We're going to talk about budget. I'm also going to throw in a lot of information about the allowable cost categories and what they mean and what's allowed and what's not. And then we're going to talk about cost share. So SAM, the System for Awards Management, is a system that the government uses for every kind of transfer of funding, grants, contracts, everything you can imagine. Every company must have a unique identifying information. I can't remember. It's a UIE. That number is required to apply for a grant. The process for applying for SAM is a free process. It's an online system. In the NOFO, it gives you all the information you need to know about applying for SAM, but it is a process that can take weeks. And so if you had not started your SAM's registration, please go back to your office today and start that process. We are not going to waive the requirement for having a UEI for the program. So please go ahead and get that started now. I cannot stress that enough. It has become a challenge for some organizations to get through the process. And so I don't want that to be an impediment for you. Grants.gov is the portal that the government uses for applying for grants. And it's a pretty good system. All of the required application forms are on the system. So when you go in and register, you can do a keyword search for NTIA. You can apply by our number, which is 11.038, and you will get to our application materials, and it will give you all of the guidance that you need for applying for the grant. So it has all of the standard forms there. There is even, and honestly, I don't apply for grants, so I haven't used the system, but there is a workspace there so that you can even develop your technical proposal within that system. You can also do it in Word and attach it and upload that into the system. But that's where you go. There's lots of information in the NOFO about how to get into grants.gov and how to apply. They also have a good help desk, and if you're having problems with the system, I'm not going to be able to help you with that. Please call their help desk and try to get the help through there. But let me know if you are having trouble with that, because we can put some pressure on them. Multiple projects. We've gotten lots of questions about, can I apply for multiple T&E projects? Can I apply for multiple research projects? How do I do that? We are not recommending that you apply for multiple T&E projects. The reason why is because we are not limiting the scope on a testing and evaluation project. And you're limited to a maximum of 50 million, no matter if you applied for 1 or 10 projects. You can show the entire scope of what you want to do in one application for T&E. If you applied for more than one, you'd have to do multiple periodic reporting. You would be managing 2 different grants, and I don't think that anyone wants to do that. So we encourage you to apply. You're not allowed to do it, but we would encourage you. We think that you will be more competitively, it will be a more favorable application if you put all of your efforts into one application for T&E. For R&D, those are discrete research projects, and we think that it makes sense to apply for those individually. So if you want to do research in interoperability, and you want to do another one on energy efficiency, and you want to do another one on some other topic, apply for those as separate projects. It will make it easier for us to evaluate. It will be easier for you to establish a budget for that. And if you were unsuccessful with one and successful on another, we also don't have to go back and redo a lot of budget and original submission materials with you. So we encourage you to go ahead and apply for those as discrete. You are not limited in any way to the number of research projects that you propose. You could do some individually, you could do some as a consortium. We want it to be as open as possible. Let's see, consortiums. Consortiums are definitely encouraged in this program. And we have some guidance in the NOFO about consortiums, but I wanted to talk about that a little bit with you. We are asking that you have some kind of a written agreement about what the different partners in the consortium will be doing. We encourage you to pick a lead. There must be a lead organization that's going to be leading the consortium, that's going to sign the grant documents and will be responsible for the reporting and for the other technical things related to the administration of a grant. So please think through this, look at that, make sure that you've provided us with the information. We would like letters of commitment from all of the partners, and really just a breakdown of how you intend to run the consortium, how you intend to work together. And then other letters of commitment. I have that here somewhere. Anytime that you are relying on another organization as a subgrantee or as a partner in that, we would like to understand how that's happening. So make sure that any partnering labs, consultants, subrecipients, all have, you've provided us with letters of commitment for any of those. The letters do not count in your page limit. Any of these extra documents are not part of the technical proposal and are not limited to the page limits. So let's talk about budget for a minute. The one thing that I would say in preparing a budget for a grant is to be as clear and as detailed as you can be. Make sure that all of your numbers match up between, there's a standard 424A that has your summary of all your budget numbers. Make sure that agrees to what's on your budget narrative and what's in your detailed budget. We have seen cases where one number doesn't match the other, and that makes it really hard for us to evaluate what you're really doing. So make sure that there's consistency across the numbers. The budget should itemize all your costs, personnel costs, fringe benefits. I'm going to get into a little bit of all the cost categories in a second. But make sure that you are really giving us a picture of what you're going to do, where you're going to spend the money, what are you going to achieve with the grants from a financial standpoint. So let's talk a little bit about the different categories of costs as required in a grant application. There are very standardized cost categories. There's personnel costs. A grant must account for people's actual time in working on the grant. So you need to have a system that will help you to document and track what people's time is. You cannot tell me that that a person is going to charge 25% of their time to the grant and have that be allowable. You're going to, over time, as you do the work, you're going to have to account for what people, obviously when you're building your budget, you're going to put 25% of someone's time. But when you actually are doing the activities, you're going to need to account for the time. So consider that and don't overestimate what it's going to take. Fringe benefits are allowable. Typically, that's a percentage of the person's salary based on a calculation of all of the components that fall into fringe. So Social Security taxes and vacation and health insurance and all of those other things. Figure out what those costs are, make sure they're documented. I don't need to see them, but they should be in your grant file. Somebody should be able to go back and say, how did you calculate your fringe? And there should be a way that you can provide that information to us as a justification. Fringe is allowable. Travel costs, we've had questions about travel costs. If your organization has a formal travel policy that is written and applies to all of your employees, you may use those same reimbursement policies for this grant. So if your organization allows you to stay at the Ritz-Carlton every night, unfortunately, we will too. If your organization does not have a formal written policy on travel reimbursement, you are required to follow the federal travel policies. So there will be per diems that GSA puts out every year, and you can find that if you Google GSA travel per diem travel policies. Equipment versus supplies. In the government, equipment is something that costs over $5,000 and has a useful life of more than 1 year. A laptop computer typically is not equipment, it's a supply. Anything that's tangible that costs less than $5,000 is a supply. Office supplies fit in that category too. But we often have questions about, can I buy a printer? Can I buy a computer? Can I buy a laptop? If there is a justification that you can tie it to the program requirements, you may do that. You do not have to track it for federal grant purposes. If you buy equipment that costs over $5,000 and has a useful life of over a year, you will have to account for that and keep an inventory of that. And depending on the useful life of that and how that fits into the grant, the federal government may continue to have an interest in that equipment after the grant ends. We will be able to help you, your grant person, your federal program officer that will be assigned to all the awardees will be able to help you with that process. But please know that the government will continue to have an interest in that equipment until it has reached the end of its useful life. Indirect costs. Indirect costs are allowable under the grant. If you have an indirect cost agreement with another federal agency, we will recognize that percentage of indirect costs. If your organization does not have a cognizant indirect cost rate agreement with another federal agency, you may use 10% as your indirect cost rate without any other documentation required. You may also try to break all those costs down and apply them as direct costs. You have that option. Anything else that doesn't fit in those categories is considered other. We had a question about if you needed to acquire or use licensed spectrum, how would you account for that? that would be other. It's a kind of a broad category. I've worked on other grants where we've had volunteer time was used as a match for the grant because it was a planning grant, and so you're trying to bring people together. All of that volunteer time was considered other. So it's a kind of a broad category. If you can fit it nicely into one of the stated categories, that's a good thing. My best advice to you in terms of developing a budget, in terms of tracking your budget, is document and have a clear explanation of how you derived the numbers that you derived. Again, you don't need to provide that to me, but there's a good chance that someone will be out to look at your documentation at some point in our monitoring process, and you want to be able to have that and be able to justify the numbers. I will also say there is something called 2 CFR 200. That is you need to know that. Google it. It's the Code of Federal Regulations, and it is the part that deals with grants. Part E has a huge list of all of the different costs that are allowed in a grant in excruciating detail. And if you ask me a question about costs and whether something's allowable or not, that's where I'm going to look. And I'm going to give you a guidance based on what it says in that document. It's well worth your time to know that and understand what it is you can charge and what it is you cannot. So I talked about this earlier. Make sure all your numbers align. It's the biggest thing that we see that causes us to have to go back and try to clean up some things after your application has gone through merit review, and the merit reviewers think it's fantastic and we want to fund it. And then we get to programmatic review where we get into looking at budgets and we go back and forth with you for many rounds, and it just delays the awards. So help us help you by making sure all those numbers align. Cost share. Many questions on cost share. We are not requiring cost share. Why, you say, are you not requiring cost share? Well, we thought that it was more important from a strategic point of view that we fund quality projects, but we want them to be cost-effective quality projects. So we did not want to put an arbitrary cost share in there and use that as the key distinguishing piece in reviewing applications. So quality is most important, but we are looking. Almost every program is better if there's a little bit of skin in the game for everyone. And this is the way that you can demonstrate. And there are lots of different ways that you can show cost share. Cost share could be related to, well, you certainly can put cash into it, but it can also be a non-cash match. It can be a match that relates to personnel. Some people use indirect costs as their cost share because it's an easy amount. You've already sunk the money into your HR department and your management and the building and the rent and everything else that goes into indirect costs. Rather than make the government pay you back that money, you use that as a cost share. So that's one way you can do it. Personnel costs can be cost share. Fringe benefits can be cost share. There are many equipment that you've already acquired that you're going to use in a project could be cost share. You have to allocate those costs according to how much you're actually going to use it for the project. But please consider the facilities that you're using. You may be able to establish an hourly rental rate, and you could use that as a cost share. So there are many, many creative ways to do it. And we encourage you to, think broadly about how you can do that and what you can bring to the table to move this project and the goals of the program forward. So now, with that, all the exciting stuff, we're going to get into a panel discussion, and we're going to try to answer a lot of the questions that you've all posed to us already, and we are going to take more questions from the audience, and this is your chance to stump the panel. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thanks, team, for the presentation so far. So now that we provided an overview of the program and the NOFO, we're going to take a deeper dive, get into some of the details. I'll be moderating a panel with my colleagues here. We hope we've anticipated some of the questions you may have, but as Carolyn pointed out, we have reserved time at the end for Q&A with the in-person audience here, so that'll be great. Before I jump in, I want to remind folks that our focus here today is on the technical aspects of the NOFO. We've got, as well as best practices for applicants navigating the federal award process. Our goal is to ensure that interested applicants have all the information you need to understand the technical requirements, successfully submit an application, and navigate the award process. So, as we mentioned, we welcome all questions, but our focus today is going to be on the technical aspects and the award process. If you do happen to have questions that fall outside that scope, we ask you to hold them. You can follow up with us afterwards. You can email us at our Innovation Fund mailbox, and we'll talk to you about that then. So let's jump right in. First question is going to be for Amanda. So the NOFO does not call out specific standards or test cases that are required for T&E activities. Why is that?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. So I think that was intentional to leave it broad and open, right? So we did not identify specific standards or test cases. I think we're more interested in hearing what you have to say, recognizing that there are a lot of use cases, there are different standards and methodologies for testing. We are interested in what you have to propose and what you have to submit in terms of test and evaluation activities, as well as the research and development aspects of this NOFO. So again, I think it's a bit intentional to leave it broad, and hopefully there is room for folks to submit their ideas to get after both of those technical focus areas.
Great. JD, this one's for you. So what is NTIA's position on virtualized or remote testing? Must all activities be conducted within the U.S. and entities can join virtually abroad?
That's a great question, Tim. So we do want to see virtualized remote testing. We think that is a good opportunity to provide a broad range of opportunities to people that may not be able to make it to every single in-person type event. We do need these virtual and remote opportunities to be hosted in the United States, but entities may be able to connect from outside the United States to these remote testing centers or virtual testing centers, as long as they meet the eligibility requirements laid out in Section 2 of the NOFO. So as long as they meet those requirements and the testing is being hosted in the U.S., whether it be a U.S. lab facility or data center or something along those lines, that is allowable in the context of this NOFO.
Great. Sarah, we're going to jump over to you. So why must T&E events and R&D take place in the U.S. and its territories?
Thanks, Tim. That's a great question, and I'm sure it's a question that is top of mind for many of our colleagues and friends in the audience. So requiring T&E events as well as R&D take place in the U.S. and our territories is really an investment in U.S. innovation and competition. So through this first wave of funding, we're really working to ensure that future 5G network technologies and future gen technologies are built not only by the U.S., but also our global partners, and not by untrusted vendors that pose serious national security risks. This will in turn help boost our U.S. national and economic security, create good jobs, and unlock opportunities for new and emerging players to enter a historically consolidated market.
Great, so let's switch gears and go back to Carolyn. She had a nice overview earlier, but what do you see as some of the top challenges in applying for a federal grant?
If I didn't scare you already, I didn't mean to. But there is a lot of complexity, and so I would really strongly encourage you to read through the NOFO. And I have a little bit of an idea of a way to do that really sort of helps, that drives at both getting an overview. First, I think you need to read through the description and the mandatory objectives. That's all listed out in 3.4 in the NOFO. Read that, sort of understand from a broad picture what it is we're looking for. Then go to the back and look at the evaluation criteria, how we're going to evaluate the NOFO. That's in section 4.1.2. If you look at how we're going to evaluate an application, and you know what the big picture that we're doing, if you then go to the actual technical proposal components that we're looking for, which is in 3.3, I hope that it will start to help you understand why we're asking for the certain parts of the technical proposal that we're asking for. And keep in mind what it is we're trying to evaluate will help you to write those narratives in a way that's concise, that's clear, that really drives to telling your story of what it is that you intend to do. So just be very thoughtful about it and really try to address what's in the NOFO. It will help you immensely. Secondly, the whole SAMS thing. Sorry, I don't control the world, but it is a requirement, and I cannot stress enough that you just need to start that process early. And finally, and this is looking at it from a different perspective, I sometimes think that grantees or people that are applying for a grant don't really understand the obligations that come when you become a grantee, when you get a federal award. So let me kind of stress a couple of these. First of all, once you say in a grant application what you're going to do, and you're awarded money to do that, that's what you have to do. If you do not do what you say you're going to do, you are either going to have to work with us to amend your award, or you're going to be in violation and we may take some money back. So please think very carefully about what you say you're going to do, because we are going to monitor your performance and we will be having some discussions. Secondly, you're going to be obligated to give us information on a periodic basis. I think we've made it semi-annually. You're lucky. Most of my grants in the past have been quarterly progress reports, but there is an obligation to give us a lot of information during the period of performance. Some of it will be written, some of it will be a phone call or a Teams call where we're gonna ask you what you're doing, how's it going, do you need any help, are you having any trouble, you got any success stories to tell us? We're gonna have a lot of conversations about what you're doing so that we can really monitor whether the grants are being effective or not. You're going to the final thing is that you have to keep good records when it comes to your financial expenditures. Grants are not contracts. You're going to get paid for the activities that you actually do. The way grants works is you expend the funds, you have the documentation for that, you draw down money in an automated system that allows you to draw down. Can you draw down before the big invoice comes? Yes, but only within 30 days. So you do not have, you don't draw down, you don't get $10 million on day one of your award. You get the money as you spend it. So again, you may get a $10 million award, but if you only spend $5 million in direct costs, you're gonna get $5 million. You're gonna get what you actually expend. And some people don't understand that. So just understand that we're gonna work with you. You're allowed up to the amount of your award, but you're gonna need to show documentation. And I cannot stress how important it is to have good documentation, because I have taken money back from grantees. I have, and it does happen. So please just be aware of that. So now that I've scared you completely, have a nice day, and we will work with you.
That is great feedback, though. So JD, why focused on test method R&D? Are existing test cases from 3GPP or the ORAN Alliance not sufficient?
So we specifically chose this topic because we want to see how we could kind of advance the state of the art. This is a huge paradigm shift, as I mentioned earlier, with this industry moving away from kind of closed, consolidated development to a more open and innovative ecosystem working with collaboration amongst multiple vendors. So we want to ensure that the test methods available, including those from 3GPP and the ORAN Alliance, are the best possible to ensure that we can move this industry forward. We also we're also interested in seeing on how existing test cases could be done better, faster, cheaper, while maintaining the same integrity of the data gathered from those tests, so we can ensure that we can lower the barrier of entry into the market, make it easier for people who want to get started in the 5G radio access network market, a lot easier for them to get engaged, be able to test their own products, and be able to ensure that they are developing a quality solution.
Excellent. Carolyn, back over to you. You touched on cost share, concept of match earlier. Can you dig in a little more on why we didn't set required match for this program?
I think I hit this pretty well in my presentation, but we want quality proposals. That's more important, but we do want you to show to every degree possible what you're bringing to the table for these grants. And it is going to be an evaluation factor. So if we had a couple of different projects that were all kind of similar quality, the one that is most cost-effective would be the one that we might choose. So it is a factor that will help us to distinguish one application from another. So think in terms of cost-effectiveness, cost share being a part of that process.
Great. And Sarah, back over to you. Why is NTIA willing to support foreign firms and entities under this program?
Thanks, Tim. That's another really good question that I'm sure our friends in the audience are also considering. So essentially, that was a strategic policy decision that NTIA made, reflecting the need to build a global network of trusted suppliers both in the U.S. and in our partner and allied countries. As you all are aware, while many of the suppliers for open and interoperable networks are based here in the U.S. or have made major investments here in the U.S., there are several important and key players headquartered abroad, including in key partnered countries as well. Therefore, to position the U.S. for success, we really are working to build this strong global network of trusted U.S. and foreign vendors. This will help level the playing field against untrusted alternatives, strengthen our global supply chain, and encourage innovation across the industry. Thanks.
Great. And for our last question of our panel, I'll go back to Amanda. What do you envision for future NOFOs and the execution of the remaining funds?
This is probably a question that is on all of your minds here today. So I thought I'd take a shot at addressing this earlier. So as I've said today during my remarks, this first NOFO really is foundational, and I think it's the first step to lay the groundwork for the development of this ecosystem. While future NOFOs are not necessarily finalized at this point, rest assured that we are actively working on that and actively engaging with our leadership to get moving on what those NOFO 2, NOFO 3 potentially look like. We recognize that there are significant challenges that we are facing in terms of delivering an open and interoperable network. I think one of those is interoperability and really a need to have industry coalesce around deciding how we can get to a more modular solution and get to something like more plug-and-play components. Driving home the need for industry to come together to solve those problems and really recognizing the challenges that we face there. So while I'll ask that folks really pay attention to the NTIA website, that's where we're going to post announcements about what's coming next. But I hope that the community here really can continue to work together and help solve some of these challenges that we're bringing up and that all of you are aware of as to how we actually implement open and interoperable networks with carriers here domestically as well as abroad.
Great, so that closes out our panel portion. Thank you, everybody, for your contributions there. So now we're going to open the floor for the next 30 minutes or so for questions from the in-person audience here. You can see we have floor mics set up. We've got 4 of them. We also have some runners that can come around and help out, so if you raise your hand if you can't get there. I'm going to do my best to call on folks in order. When it's your turn, please state your name, organization, and then ask your question. As Amanda pointed out, we did receive questions in advance. We're going to try and get to some of those also, but recognize that we're going to use that to develop our next round of FAQs also. And final reminder, purpose of today's session is to help interested applicants understand the technical aspects of the NOFO and the federal awards process. So if you have questions that are outside of that scope, we ask that you take those to us after the session. You can follow up via our mailbox. So with that, gentleman right here.
Hello, good morning. Thanks. This is Ian Wong from Viavi Solutions. Thank you for hosting this event. It's very informative. I do have 2 questions, one more technical and one more kind of about the grants process. So maybe I'll start with the technical one. The NOFO did not call out like the RAN Intelligent Controller, the RIC, as one of the components in the, it calls out CUDU, RU, for example. Like, is that just not a focus, or should, you know, if a grant or if a proposal includes it, will it be detrimental?
So a lot of the primary focus for this one has been really about the interoperability between the CU, RU, and DU. Because of the RIC development being very kind of early stage and also kind of being a new nascent feature in terms of the overall 5G ecosystem, we did not put a whole lot of emphasis on that. So the primary focus and what would probably give preference to is applications specifically relating to the CU, DU, and RU interoperability, performance, and security.
Thank you. And a question more on the grant side. So for direct and indirect costs, I know the performance needs to be done in the U.S., but a lot of us are global companies with, you know, R&D facilities in our allied countries as well. Like, are those allowable as direct or indirect costs?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
In the front here.
Good morning. My name is Hongwei Zhang. I'm a professor of computer engineering at Iowa State University. So as part of the National Science Foundation Platform for Advanced Wireless Research Program, and actually with support from many colleagues in the room, we have been leading the effort of developing the ERA Rural Wireless Living Lab in Central Iowa. So it's going to be ready for public use around this summer. So we're looking forward to working with colleagues and folks in making that available to the community pretty soon to align with the timing of the program. So as part of the ERA Power project, we have been thinking about rural broadband a lot in recent years. You know, I think traditionally we have been mostly, I think our strategies have been mostly treating rural broadband as a challenge we got to solve. That's actually true. But in the meantime, what I think as a country, what we have not tapped well enough is how to leverage rural use cases to drive innovation of advanced wireless technologies. Because there are many use cases that can be first tried out in, for example, in Central Iowa before you do it in Manhattan or even DC here. So I think to leverage those opportunities, actually open innovation is going to be key enabler, not only enabling the the new participant companies, but also empower the rural regions to participate. I think that's actually the root cause for where we are today as a country and also as a society in general. So, with that, we're very excited for this, this NIFA Open Innovation Fund program and so on. So one question I have there is that, because one beauty of Open Run is rapid iteration, right? So if you look at the time frame for this first LOFA, we're looking at 5-year time frame, right? So I think in that 5-year time window, we're going to see potentially iteration of testing technologies. For example, we are actually working with partners in developing some of the test capabilities that can be integrated into the aerial power platform probably within about 1 or 2 year time frame. So the question is, for the T&E activity, right, does that accommodate the cases where we actually work with potential users, understand the needs, but then rapidly iterate and incorporate new developments into the effort? That is, besides doing the testing event and all other activities that have been mentioned, could we embed some elements of development and into that? Thank you.
Who wants to tackle that one?
So I think for that particular case, what I would encourage you to do is apply for both an R&D grant and a T&E grant, because we do want to kind of see how we understand the industry will progress over the next 5 years, and we don't necessarily want to have testing be stagnant. So I recommend looking at seeing how you can incorporate some of that rapid iteration into your T&E process, but the key part for the T&E activities is ensuring that we have capabilities that will result in industry-accepted results, so it's not necessarily, oh, well, JD thought of that one, and he thought it was a good idea, but no one else agrees. We want to ensure that there's some amount of, industry support behind the testing that goes along in the T&E activity, so there is more credibility into the results. So if you can, I recommend if you can build that into your proposal, just demonstrate how this rapid iteration can still result in industry kind of coalescing around the tests being performed and those results. I would strongly emphasize that in your application.
Who wants to go next? Right here in the front. And folks, if you want to line up, you're welcome to. I'll call you in order.
Yeah, John Baker from Avenir. A couple of questions. Does the application in one, if you apply for participation in one consortium, does the grant impact the ability to participate in other consortiums as applying for the grant?
No, it should not impact your ability to partner in any different way. The cap of on the research focus areas of $50 million will be applied against the prime grantee in every circumstance. So if you're a prime on one and a partner on another, that won't impact you.
Okay, because that was the next question is, in terms of the 50 million limit, is that per company or per project or per consortium?
It's for whoever is the prime grantee, the primary grantee of that project.
Okay, so leading that into the next question then, if we are prime on one project and let's say it's 25 million, if the other project we participated in also totaled more than 25 million again, does that get cut off at 50 million?
If you're the prime on both, yes. If you're a sub-grantee on one or a partner in a consortium on one and the prime on another, it would not.
Okay, thank you.
Over here to the left, and then you'll be next, sir.
Hi, thanks. Eric Berger from Virginia Tech. Techno-contractual question and a contractual techno question. I'll do the techno-contractual one first. If we put in all the stuff that Carolyn talked about, we could have as little as like 2 pages to describe what we're really doing. Or if we, kind of condense that down, we could have like maybe 12 pages. How much detail are you looking for? And I'm thinking now on the R&D one in particular. How much detail are you looking for in kind of like the science and all that?
From my perspective, we are more interested in what is the concept that you're going to be testing, how are you going to approach it, what is your experience in making you capable of doing that testing, and what are the potential outcomes. So we would be looking for it on much more of a results-oriented, capabilities-oriented response, but I'll let JD answer that too.
I think I would kind of answer your question with a question is since a lot of this will be, all of our grant applications for both T&E and the R&D proposals will go through merit review. And so if you can, needs to be in sufficient detail that a group of your peers could review it and be like, you know what, this makes a lot of sense. There's some sound scientific principles here. I have high confidence that this would, it's research and development. Not everything works in research and development. We understand that. But we understand that the process being proposed is technically sound and that this will actually result in some quality results and definitive answers. So that's primarily what we're looking for, and what we're looking for in terms of the amount of technical detail is enough to be able to say, yes, Eric knows what he's doing. He knows what he's talking about. He has a sound plan. There isn't a whole lot of holes we can poke him through this. This has a lot of technical merit.
Okay, great, thanks. And the other one is, and it's kind of a T&E one maybe, but the thought, is there an appetite for, yeah, we're going to set up a lab, and oh, by the way, here's a couple of tens of millions of dollars, and you guys figure out how to dole that out to other kind of R&D kind of stuff? Or are you really looking for, no, we want a proposal for a T&E facility, proposals for R&D facilities, and the two shall be apart? Of course, I understand apply for both if you want, but I'm thinking more that higher level where it's the prime is actually going to be allocating the funds, not NTIA's fund doing it to the prime, and then the prime would be doling out funds.
I don't think we were envisioning it that way.
Okay, good, thank you.
But we're open.
But I see Amanda's about to jump in.
Yeah, I think I would recommend submitting that, right? If you have a concept to do that, I would define it in your technical approach as to what that would look like and how you would go about interacting with those sub-performers that you would be working with.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, and then we'll go to you next.
Is this on? There we go. Dilip Shahari with Access Partnership. Thanks so much for doing this. Questions about the budget range that you've suggested for the R&D program, which is I think $250K to $2 million. First question is, do you envision that whatever the budget is that is proposed would be the award? Or do you envision scenarios where someone proposes a $2 million budget and you say, well, maybe not, but we'll give you 1.5. Is that kind of a scenario likely or on the table? And then the second question would be, just wondering how hard those guidelines are in your minds, because I know they're not statutory. And if we say wanted $3 million, do we just put in a proposal for $3 million, or do we put in a proposal and say, here's a $2 million proposal, but here's another page of what we could do if you were to give us 3 instead of 2? Thanks.
It is a range and it is not a maximum. So if you have a project that you can describe and explain why it would be more than that, we would be absolutely willing to accept that. There are always chances that we will come back to you and want to negotiate the scope and the budget of a project. But it would be under some specific concern about maybe one particular aspect of a project where we would say, we really like this, but we think this part is a little bit of an outlier, so it would be very much tied to what you're planning to do, as opposed, I think that's probably accurate.
Good morning. My name's Henry Orwela from XCOM Labs. Just wanted to ask real quick, for the prime participants, do they need to get from their subcontractors the level of detail that they have to provide in terms of personnel, fringe benefits, all those cost details?
The primary applicant awardee, if they are using subs, are required to pass down all of the same requirements for documentation and for activities that fall on the prime would also cascade down to the sub. But the prime would be responsible for ensuring that that happens. We typically, when we monitor grants, we monitor the prime. We don't go down and go into the sub, except in how we address any issues with the sub with the prime. Okay. So the same requirements exist. It's just the relationship that the government has is with the prime and not with the sub.
Okay, so when we submit our proposal, we don't necessarily have to submit all that detail.
No.
We just have to be able to report it if we need to.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Good morning. Mike Naraki from Addis. You mentioned that there are considerations for future NOFOs, but that will kind of evolve over time, and we assume that there'll be overlapping to some extent. I guess the question is there any value in the response to this NOFO of kind of relating to the future of how this response might relate to future considerations, or should we stay very much inside the box?
I would recommend that you prepare your application to respond to what we've asked for in this NOFO. We're thinking about it at the strategic level and how they will all fit together and how future NOFOs will potentially interact with this first NOFO. So I think it would be best for you to focus on what is at hand currently, and we'll address interaction in later NOFOs when they're released.
I should go back to the gentleman in the back.
Thank you. Sorry, Kevin Klein with Wind River. So a question on the TE side of things. If you're setting up a facility, is what is envisioned here, or will it be criteria where these facilities themselves will be open, so the testing environment will be open beyond the grant participants?
Yes, that is the desire. A real core part of that, and this goes into the sustainability that Amanda talked about in some of her remarks, is that we would like to see this, like if it's a 3 or 5 year period of performance for this grant that you propose, that there is at least a plan included in your proposal, like how, we get this kicked off, the ball gets rolling, industry really buys into these testing activities, releasing real results that can continue under its own power after the federal funds have expired.
Thank you.
Good morning again. So if I may just ask a question about clarifying the notion of industry-adopted T&E activities, right? We understand organizations such as 3GPP or have played essential roles in defining some of the interfaces, standards, and so on. But in the meantime, I think we also recognize that especially the current mature interfaces or standard, have actually probably not actually considered some of the unique settings of rural America, right, including farms and communities. So the question is, besides looking at those well-known kind of mature, organizations, right? How do we have other means of demonstrating industry adoption? For example, there's a lot of rural carriers who are not in the table in defining those standards either, right? So could we have any advice on how to demonstrate or different ways of demonstrate industry adoption, or what we mean by industry in particular also? Could that be a more inclusive or, kind of?
That's a great question. So I don't want to say there's one answer to that question either. There's a lot of different ways to demonstrate industry adoption. I think I'd say the key spirit behind what we wanted to show with the industry adoption piece was that that there was, some momentum from industry, both from operators and suppliers and other stakeholders that, we believe this test has some validity to it. It provides us useful data. I recommend that if you are kind of looking at some of that more, I would say non-traditional approaches or tests, or maybe looking at specific use cases such as rural environments, that maybe look at potentially bringing together different industry partners that can demonstrate when you do look to bring that together. Like, hey, yes, we looked at it. Rural Operator USA looked at this, and we think there's a lot of merit to this. This is actually useful information for us to be able to assess the capabilities of a open radio access network piece, being able to support function well in our network.
Hi, Cam Lilly, Mobile Frontiers. Our question is around the use of software tools for testing. The NOFO seems focused mostly on TNM type contracts. What are your thoughts on using software and automation tools to address some of the testing needs?
Highly encourage. We really do see a lot of software testing aspects as an ability to help increase availability of testing beyond, having to go to have either a physical lab set up and be able to, send a team there, send equipment, be able to plug everything in and test it. The more we're really interested in seeing what applications can bring software and automated testing to the table, because we see that as a potential opportunity to increase accessibility and to increase repeatability of tests.
Great, thank you.
Hi, Michele Polese from Northeastern University. I have two questions. The first question is, what exactly is excluded from the 20 pages limit?
So all the attachments, so letters of support, consortium agreements, what am I missing? Anything that resumes, all the budget pieces are all separate documents. So it's really just the core technical proposal is the 20 pages. But if there are documents that we're asking for in support of that for, who's the prime investigator, or in the CV for the prime investigator or something like that, those would all be separate.
All right, thanks. And the second question is for the R&D projects. Let's say we are considering testing a system, an end-to-end system that integrates a RIC. Will be considered out of scope?
So not necessarily. The primary focus, as mentioned before, is on the RU, CU, and DU, given that that's the kind of the core pieces of open interoperability we're trying to solve now. But if there is a RIC aspect to that won't necessarily be disqualified, but it may be deprioritized if it does not include the RU, CU, and DU components.
All right, thanks.
Andrea Fumagalli, UT Dallas. A question about what is counted towards the 20 pages. Where are the citations? Are those included in the 20 pages, or are those additional?
I think that they would probably be separate. I think they would be an attachment if you have particular citations.
Okay. Thank you.
Greetings, Omer from NI, National Instrument, Test and Measurement. I had a question about TE. So since we have partnerships with academia, industry, is there a preference in terms of who should lead the TE? And especially in the early stages, does it make sense to have academia lead since it's more on the innovation edge?
I think we're agnostic on that. I think you need to look at your team and the people that you're considering partnering with and pick the most appropriate and capable partners as the prime.
And on the R&D side, would it be acceptable to focus on the RU and have a agile, or we're thinking more on a FPGA system where it could be updated at 3GPP Evolve and the Open RAN Evolve.
So specifically, I do want to make sure we're on the same page that we're talking R&D. In the context of this NOFO, R&D is for R&D for testing and evaluation methods. So it can be something that's iterative, and we do want, part of the evaluation criteria is how can this be forward-looking and support future, either future 5G iterations or even looking to 6G. What's the longevity of the test method and how it can, have the biggest impact in the industry. So that is actually one of the evaluation factors. So if that's part of your proposal, that's something we definitely would like to see highlighted, and how it could be extensible beyond the future, beyond a current 5G 3GPP release or into the future releases.
Give thanks.
So I'll look at one of our pre-submitted questions, JD. So from Stephen Sharbaugh from Womble Bond Dickinson, is there a minimum expected period of sustainability for a project beyond the period of performance?
So, short answer, no. Long answer is, of course, we'd like to be as long as possible. So I think the key part here is part of this is also, looking into the crystal ball, predicting the future a little bit. It's more about how sustainable is and I will kind of divide this up for T&E and the R&D. For the T&E activities, it is how can this, move forward? How can we see this, these activities continue beyond the availability of federal funding, continue under industry's own power? That's the key part we're looking there. There is no kind of minimum period of sustainability, but we would like to see documented like how you would facilitate that sustainability moving forward. Taking account for, new technology developments, new changes in industry, newer 3GPP releases, that sort of thing. So that's that component there. For R&D, it's a little bit different, where it's not necessarily, we want you to continue this R&D for forever. We understand that this is more finite projects, but we would like to see the results of these projects. If it does result in a successful test method R&D, that if it does get incorporated into a specification organization, or does have some of that forward-looking aspects where it can be incorporated into future releases or into future Gs, that's something that we're interested in, to see how it can affect the industry long term, so we can maximize the impact of this fund. So not necessarily a minimum period of sustainability, but we do want to see how can this provide the biggest impact over time.
So I've got another pre-submitted question, then I'll go to you, sir. Sarah, this one's from Bill McKinney from Analog Devices. Talks about how many of the companies in the Open RAN ecosystem have development teams that span across multiple countries. Will the U.S. place a performance requirement continue for future funding opportunities within the Innovation Fund?
So great question. As I mentioned earlier, we made a strategic policy decision in regards to this first NOFO. And so we are still determining these strategic policy decisions for future NOFOs and refining the scope. And as Amanda and the team also mentioned, for our most up-to-date information, please look at our Innovation Fund website at nta.gov. Thanks.
Hello. Hi, Ian Wong again from Viavi Solutions. So it basically is, there seems to be different roles in, of course, a grant, right? You can be the principal applicant in a consortia, part of a consortia, a subcontractor, or even just in the background, an equipment supplier, right? You just sell equipment. So can you just give it a high level, like what are the pros and cons of doing each one? Like if you're a consortia, you're not the, what would you use as a criteria to choose as the principal applicant, for example? So I don't know, if you can provide an overview of that, will be very useful.
Honestly, we tried very hard to not presuppose what's the best way for you to implement your project. So I think that it's a very situational thing. How you use subcontracts, how subgrantees, whether you do it as a consortium, is really a function probably of how you intend to operate the project and what are the roles and responsibilities. So if you're all kind of on an equal footing, that's kind of a consortium. Each partner is bringing something to the table that sort of contributes to the whole. Sub-awards are usually to people that have a particular kind of expertise that is necessary for the project, but the prime is really the person or the entity that is doing the lion's share of the work. We also get into things around what's the difference between a contract and a sub-grantee. Well, in that case, usually a sub-grantee is someone who's doing a substantial amount or has a real role in the project, as opposed to a contract where you're just buying a service. You're buying something, equipment, service, something, and where there's no real flow down of the grant rules to the vendor who is providing that contract work. So there is a lot of flexibility, and really the onus is going to be on your team to determine what's the best way to look at this. I wish I could give you a yes, no, here it is, black and white answer, but it's completely up to the individual teams to put together what they think is going to be the best working relationships.
So we're pushing the end of our time here. I see we have one more questioner there. I'll take one or two more questions then, so sir.
Yeah, this is Afete Daja from CTI's 5G security testbed. My first question is, is there a minimum of testing activities we have to have during a year? And because for T&E activities. The second question is can we have a gating criteria? Because if you're allowing people to come and test in your lab, can you set some conditions like, okay, it has to reach this maturity before you allow the equipment to come in your lab, so that we don't allow any immature equipment in your lab?
Well, first of all, yes, you can set gating criteria. I would make sure that that's part of your application. In terms of the number of events that you're conducting in a year, that again, we're leaving that to the applicants to decide how many events they're going to do and what will be the cadence of those events and what is the gating criteria. So that really needs to be described, but we would be happy to entertain any application for any number of events that you'd like to hold.
I think one thing I'll quickly add to that as well is ensuring that the gating criteria don't become a barrier to participation too much, so new entrant innovators, it becomes too onerous for them to participate. I mean, obviously, don't want to have just someone that downloaded some code off of GitHub and shows up like, I want to test out my new, CU-DU combination that may not know exactly what they're doing or be really familiar with the space. Totally understand that. But we want to ensure, and this is also part of some of the optional criteria that we did include in the NOFO, but we do want to encourage this innovative environment and look at potential, like maybe not necessarily quite right for testing. Is there an ability for your facility to provide some of that kind of like incubation capability to help some of those new entrants become more mature so they can are in a better spot to test against their peers?
One more question there?
Yeah, good morning. This is Chinmay from Capgemini. So as we understand that these testing and validation services would be done in the US territories, but there are companies from outside the world also. So is there any availability condition that it has to be 24/7 supported?
That is not required. If you want to support that, that is allowable.
Thank you.
Yeah, John Baker from Evony again. Just one sort of grey area. This is about obviously testing evaluation and product performance, but does this cover if you've got a DU with software code inside it, that the DU code could be optimized in the process of improving the test methods? So it's sort of part product development, part test and evaluation. Sorry for the tough one.
Carolyn said there would be a stumping question.
So it depends. In the context of T&E activities, that's the reason why it's there, is so you can go test this equipment, figure out, improve performance, optimize your solutions. In terms of R&D, if you are developing a test method and it happens to help you develop a product, that's a byproduct, but that is not the primary mission of the grant. The primary mission of the grant is to develop these new and innovative test and evaluation methods for the R&D side. And I mean, a lot of innovation happens based off the byproducts of other products. That's how we got a lot of the fun tools we have today. So I would say that is not the primary mission, and I wouldn't necessarily make that your primary mission, but it's not like we're gonna be upset if your product happened to get better while you were developing an R&D method.
Great. Well, with that question, we'll wrap it up. I want to thank you all for your interest in the Innovation Fund and talking about our first NOFO today. I'm going to invite Sarah Skaluba up to provide some closing remarks.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Tim. So thank you all so much for joining us this morning. Your continued engagement is honestly critical to the success of this program. As my colleagues mentioned earlier, your feedback did play a key role in development of our first funding opportunity, and it will continue to prove invaluable moving forward. Of course, right, the Innovation Fund, this huge initiative, would not be possible without the leadership of a bipartisan, bicameral group of lawmakers who first authorized the Innovation Fund in 2021 and then later provided appropriations to really make this program a reality. We also appreciate the Commerce Department's partnership on this program and hope that today's session really highlighted the thoughtful yet ambitious approach the team is taking to administer this program. Today, you had the opportunity to hear from NTIA's leadership about how we aim to utilize this $1.5 billion to not only drive wireless innovation and strengthen our supply chain, but also really foster much-needed competition. Through this initiative, we also aim to unlock opportunities for small and emerging players to compete in a historically consolidated market and to provide our allies and friends with additional trusted, innovative network choices. Earlier, you heard from our grants expert, Carolyn Dunn, on how to effectively navigate the federal awards process and how to draft a strong application package. You also heard from our team's chief technologist, JD Griffith, on the technical elements of this first funding opportunity. We truly appreciate you all coming to join us this morning and for bringing your questions. We hope that it was a helpful opportunity as we look ahead to the June 2nd application deadline. Looking forward, as we mentioned earlier, we really encourage you to utilize our website for the most up-to-date information and to email the team at innovationfund@nta.gov with any additional questions that you think of. As I think we also mentioned, we will be developing additional FAQs moving forward as well. And finally, today's event was truly an all-hands-on-deck program, so huge thanks to Tim Moyer, Richard Upchurch, Elena Bryan, and Corey Shermer, who recently joined our Innovation Fund team, Margaret McGill in our Office of Public Affairs, Eric Rosenberg in our Office of Spectrum Management, our front office, our Office of the Chief Counsel, many friends who helped us here today. It would genuinely not have been possible without you all. And so with those very brief closing remarks, I will pass the baton back to Amanda, who will officially close us out. Thank you all so much for joining.
All right, folks, I don't want to belabor this anymore. Thank you again for your participation. We look forward to your applications. We look forward to entertaining any additional questions you might have, so please go ahead and submit those. We will get back to you or post them as a frequently asked question. And we hope this is just the start of many engagements to come. So thank you all and good luck on your applications.